The Gaelic game is rising because the championship is upon us. Máire, Treasa, where do you want to start with what we have in the papers?
I think I'd have to start with the Mail on Sunday, and I would actually tell people who, if they haven't gone out for their Sunday papers yet, you might be thinking it's a bit late in the day, there's no point in getting them now, but if you're a Gaelic Games fan and if you're in the mood for good analysis and stuff, go get yourself the Mail on Sunday. There's some really good articles in there. But I think one that's going to pick up steam over the next few days and weeks is once our heads and thoughts and minds perhaps turn from the Euros and from the league. And obviously we know the league hasn't been perfect and it gave us great games, but obviously we know there haven't been league finals aside from yesterday's, obviously. But we're going to start talking about the knockout and the knockout nature of championship and the knockout allegedly appeal, which Shane McGrath has a great article here in the Mail today talking about how it does little for the likes of Clare's David Tubridy. And we can all talk about the romance of the knockout, and if it wasn't for the knockout we wouldn't have had the story of Cavan and the story of Tipperary, and they are great stories and they're going to go down to the annals of history. But are they really doing teams and players in particular, are they doing them justice? Like when you think of the amount of years, and never mind even the last year in particular, that David Tubridy has put into playing for Clare, and the hours of training and the injury prevention and the injuries and the rehab and the physio and the time lost from work and personal life. And then, as Shane McGrath puts it very succinctly and very black and white, right in his first line, in 6 days' time, the Clare footballers will be done for the year. They play Kerry in the Munster Championship next Saturday night. The game will be played in Fitzgerald Stadium, regularly cited as the most picturesque GAA venue on the island. For their rivals in Munster, it must hold all the attraction of an abattoir. And that's the long and short of it is, unless Clare pull off a miracle, which, and that's not to disrespect Clare in any way, shape or form. They're a wonderful team of footballers who, when we were talking earlier about Eamon Sweeney's piece about how the Irish team should be looking and seeing what you can do with the talent you have instead of bemoaning what you don't have. Clare has great talent, and Colm Collins has found a way to get the absolute best out of those players on and off the field. But barring major incident, David Tubridy's and the rest of that Clare's team's championship dreams are over next Saturday night. And I know we're in a pandemic, and I know the GAA were, when you think about it, it's miraculous. Any games are being played, especially last year. Was there any way at all that we could have found a qualifier or a backdoor route? I would have loved to have seen it. I suppose my opinion doesn't count for much, but I just think it's very cruel that there are teams all over the country who, next weekend aren't going to be playing anymore.
Also makes it more likely, Dave, that Dublin win the All-Ireland again.
Yeah, it does. There are fewer days for them to be got at, as would have been the case maybe in a backdoor or in a Super 8s, for example. And yeah, it's so hard to see beyond the Dublin-Kerry final, and then it's just a question of whether Kerry can go close to what they did in 2019 and maybe get over the line. And I do find that unsettling to an extent, that the championship hasn't even begun and we're already talking about there really only being two teams that can possibly compete against each other, and that in all certainty the final pairing is almost set in stone. But look, let's give some credit to the GAA. I would find it very unlikely that there's anybody in the higher echelons of the GAA in Croke Park that believe a knockout format is the best format.
Oh, agreed. Agreed, yeah.
So, yeah, there's nobody that thinks that this is the way it should be.
It's the scheduling.
And last year, it is a scheduling issue. And last year, it was all down to nostalgia. And I had that warm...
You got the Cavan thing.
We had the Cavan thing, and we had that warm, fuzzy coat of nostalgia where you remember going up, well, from my personal circumstances, being dragged all over Ulster, the 9 counties in my childhood, and everything was on the line. And these really hot, sticky, suffocating afternoons where you were watching Cavan play Donegal or Tyrone or Armagh, and you knew that it was up to this 70 minutes, and then after that one of these teams was done for the rest of the year. And it was almost an exhausting experience, but it was an exhilarating one as well. But it was not the right way for things to be, and that's why the qualifying and the backdoor system came into place. And I don't think they had any option last year. Their hands were tied. The question around this debate this time around is, was there an alternative? Was there a way the schedule could have been rejigged? Could they possibly have started things a couple of weeks earlier? Could they have got rid of the league format completely and just got a championship in place so that after a few weeks training and maybe some challenge matches, so they could have enough dates in the calendar to play qualifiers? My personal opinion is that 2021 will be seen as a lost year when it came to experimenting with a radical championship structure. Scrap the provincial championships for 1 year only on a trial basis, cite COVID-19 and the pandemic as the major reasoning behind it, put it in stone on paper that this was a 12-month deal only, and that in 2022, well, even after a review of everything, we would go back to the provincial championship and backdoor system if necessary. But you play the 8 groups of 4, where the top 2 end up in a last 16 in an A championship, and the bottom 2 play in the last 16 of a B championship. You play both finals over the course of a couple of weekends at Croke Park, hopefully with fans. Everybody, at the bare minimum, gets 4 championship games, and then next year we could revert to type if necessary. There would have been the time to do that. There would not be a situation where David Tubridy and Clare are heading to Killarney next Saturday night, and I'm on commentary for that for Sky, and I can't wait to be there, and it's going to be a good occasion. But barring a shock of absolutely cataclysmic proportions, Clare are going to be done. And David Tubridy was one of those players likely to walk away after last year's championship. He didn't follow in the footsteps of Gordon Kelly and Gary Brennan and leave. He decided to give it another go. I'm sure he's glad he did so, because he's written himself into the annals of the record books in league history. But David Tubridy's not going to get to play championship again for Clare almost certainly after next weekend. And look at Sligo, for example, and it's something that Mark O'Shea has cited in his piece in the Mail on Sunday today. Sligo didn't get to kick a ball in last year's championship because of COVID-19 cases in their camp. Tony McIntyre is going to bring them to play Mayo next weekend, and they're going to be beaten, and they'll have played 1 championship match in 2 years. And that is an awful situation for them to be in.
Unless the Cillian O'Connor injury skews the potential for that to not happen, for them to win. I think the lesson of this is they got to get it right next year. They got to get it right next year, structurally.
But we know what's happening next year, John. We are going to go down the line where there's going to be no qualifiers or backdoor for the Division 3 and Division 4 sides. So there are going to be some sides in the championship in 21 and 22 that will play 1 game. And then they will go into this second tier competition. And there are very few people that think that's the way to go as well. I just think that this was the year, this was the opportunity where you could rip it up for 12 months and then take a step back and assess how everything had gone. And I think that chance has been lost. And while I do think someday, somewhere down the line, we will end up in this Champions League type format, this was a year where you could make an excuse for it and manage to get it in there and just see how things panned out.
I think they need to rip it up straight away. I think they need to just completely...
That's not going to happen, though.
Yeah, I wish they would, though.
We know what...
Well, because they ripped it up to get the club and the inter-county season separate. So why can't they do it for the championship?
Well, to be fair to them, and I always cite this whenever we are giving out, because that's technically what we are doing, they're in charge of every club in the island of Ireland and the county scene, and the two don't operate well together, you know what I mean? One gets in the way of the other, and then they've got football and hurling to be dealing with as well. So there's a lot of, and then it's nearly too democratic. If you wanted to rip something up and start again, it would be very difficult because there's a democracy at play in this as well. So I understand why it's slow to change, but I do agree with Dave that this was the year that if you wanted to rip up the rule book and go for it, you were able to do it. Because like you said, John, last year we managed to do it with the club and county. And this actually segues very well then into Mark O'Shea's article, because he's saying that the GAA are paying the price for the slow return, and hindsight's a great thing, obviously, but with all the injuries we're seeing now, had the county teams be allowed back to train a bit earlier, we might have had fewer injuries. And it's easy to say now, but now they're playing catch up, and we're seeing it's taking its toll on the bodies. And just between that and the fact that the league then was kind of devalued, like if you start a competition, you probably should finish it, especially because we had some great games as well. It was a good league. It was great fun to participate in. It was great to watch. And I just sometimes wonder, and I get why the GAA find this so difficult, but have they not maybe cut their own legs out from under themselves? They had the opportunity for 2 wonderful showcases this summer between the league and trying something new, and it didn't happen. Now, I'm sure there's very good reasons why it didn't, but it's an awful shame that the league wasn't finished and we didn't try something different for championship this year. The stage was set. Everybody would have just been delighted to be at the show.
Yeah, I just wish there was a 5 to 10 year plan for this, that in 10 years' time we're going to have provinces either not happening at all or in the spring, and you have your provincial championship and you have your lovely winner, but then you actually have a league championship in the summer. That means something. I'm reading Mark O'Shea saying that sometimes the league mattered, sometimes it didn't. I'm tired of the league. I'm just tired of it. It's great for Division 3 and 4 teams, but have that in the summer and have meaning to it, and have different tiers of finals, and have super weekends, and have teams travelling around the country, and this kind of hodgepodge of a structure. To me, I can't understand why we couldn't have had no hurling league and actually had the round robin in Leinster and Munster. It would have been much more entertaining, would have been much more meaningful than what we're going to have now in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, it is. You look at it, and it's this old debate where you look at the championship structure as things stand at the moment. Kerry are going to beat a Division 2 team in Clare to get to a Munster final, so to within 70 minutes of an All-Ireland semi-final, where a team in a similar position up in Ulster could be drawn in the preliminary round and are going to have to fight their way out of the Ulster Championship to get to the same place as Kerry and play lesser opposition. Kerry will be than the sides up in Ulster, where there are more Division 1 sides, and you've got teams like Derry and Armagh that are very much on the rise. You have Monaghan holding on to their Division 1 status, and then you have the perennial favourites in Tyrone and Donegal. Tipperary, the reigning Munster champions, are now a Division 4 team. Now, I know it's the same in Ulster with Cavan, but there are so many other sides that have a realistic chance of taking on anybody in Ulster, and we don't have that in the situation that currently resides in Munster, and it is outdated. I think there's a place for the provincial championships, but as you say, John, play them a bit earlier in the year, come up if absolutely necessary with some way to link it to the championship, a league-style championship format. But we've seen how important the league has been to teams this year. Look at Offaly, for example, back-to-back promotions. They're really making strides under John Mahon. They got to play in Croke Park yesterday. Derry with back-to-back promotions under Rory Gallagher, playing a brand of football that I don't think anybody would have previously associated with Rory Gallagher coach teams. There is so much to be excited about going into the championship until you come back to the realisation with a resounding bump that Dublin are going to play Kerry in an All-Ireland final in a few weeks' time.
Kevin's been in touch on 53106. Surely the problem is that the league is discounted in GA. Season over after one game. Were there not league games? No other team sport places all its focus on a cup competition. That's his text there on 53106.